This AI-generated podcast is for general information only and does not constitute financial or legal advice. Listeners should independently verify all information. Please consult a qualified professional.
Welcome to the Luxembourg Fundcast. Produced by Bertrand Mariaux, a regulatory lawyer qualified as Avocat à la Cour in Luxembourg and Paris, this show brings you reliable insights on Luxembourg regulations sourced from curated official references. This episode is current as of 11 June 2026.
So today we are taking a deep dive into the strict procedural requirements for the suitability of investment advice within Luxembourg private banking.
Right.
And to really anchor this analysis, we are going to be relying on two very specific legal texts. First, we have the Luxembourg Law of 5 April 1993 on the financial sector as amended.
Which, just to be concise today, we will refer to as the 1993 Financial Sector Law.
Exactly. And the second text we're using is Commission Delegated Regulation EU 2017-565 of 25 April 2016.
Right, and we will just establish that ongoing shorthand as the 2016 Delegated Regulation.
Yeah, that makes it easier. So before we get into the operational details, I think we need to establish the primary thesis of this deep dive, like the one absolute must-know rule that governs everything we are discussing today.
Well, that primary thesis is very straightforward. Investment advice is strictly legally conditioned on sufficient client information. I mean, if a firm lacks this preliminary information, it is legally prevented from recommending investment services or financial instruments.
Period.
Yeah, exactly. No information, no advice.
It sounds so simple, but, the operational mechanics behind it are actually quite rigorous.
Oh, absolutely.
And to demonstrate that suitability, there is essentially a three-part structure that firms have to navigate, right? Like you have the collection of the data, the analysis of that data, and then the formal documentation of the results.
Yeah, three mandatory conditions, and it really all starts with that first phase, the collection of evidence.
Right, so let's look at that. If a firm needs this data to operate, what exactly are the statutory components required by Article 37-3, Paragraph 4 of the 1993 Financial Sector Law? I mean, what are they actually legally mandated to collect?
So, Article 37-3, Paragraph 4 of the 1993 Financial Sector Law outlines very specific parameters. First, you have to assess the client's knowledge and experience in the investment field.
So establishing their baseline financial literacy for this specific product?
Exactly. But it goes beyond just experience. Following that, the firm must objectively evaluate the client's financial situation. And importantly, this evaluation must explicitly establish their capacity to bear losses.
Wait, let me stop you there.
Sure.
Because capacity to bear losses feels like a very distinct operational parameter.
It is. It's not just a simple summary of their net worth.
Right. It's mathematically quantifying the financial threshold of whether they can actually afford to lose without compromising their standard of living.
Precisely. And then adding to those 2 points, the collection process also has to secure the client's specific investment objectives along with their risk tolerance.
Okay, so that's 4 data points. Knowledge, financial situation with loss capacity, objectives, and risk tolerance.
Yeah. And we also have to factor in Article 54, Paragraph 2A of the 2016 Delegated Regulation, which mandates the inclusion of the client's sustainability preferences where relevant.
Right, so that's the full set of parameters. But this brings up a procedural question. What happens if a client just, provides partial information? Like, what if they share their objectives but refuse to disclose their capacity to bear losses?
Well, this is where we return directly to our primary thesis. Under Article 54, Paragraph 8 of the 2016 Delegated Regulation, failing to obtain this information entirely prevents the firm from recommending financial instruments.
So they can't proceed at all?
They cannot. It is an absolute statutory block. If the firm does not have the comprehensive set of information, the legal barrier to providing advice drops instantly.
Wow. Okay, so there is zero operational flexibility there.
None. And it is crucial to understand why. We are dealing with an EU regulation here. And because the 2016 Delegated Regulation is a regulation, it is binding in its entirety. It is directly applicable in all member states under Article 288 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union or the TFEU.
Ah, right. So the direct applicability under the TFEU means a firm in Luxembourg can't look for some sort of local exemption.
Exactly. There are no national transposing workarounds. The prohibition in Article 54, Paragraph 8 applies the exact moment that client data is missing.
Okay, that makes sense. So that covers the collection phase. Well, say you have the data. You have secured their loss capacity, their risk tolerance, and everything required under Article 37-3, Paragraph 4 of the 1993 Financial Sector Law.
Right.
But having a file full of client data doesn't automatically mean you are giving suitable advice.
No, it doesn't.
The firm has to actually logically map that data to specific financial products.
So how do firms standardize this connecting process? How do you move from the profile to the recommendation without risking compliance nonconformity?
Well, that transition is tightly governed by Article 54, Paragraph 2 of the 2016 Delegated Regulation. The advice provided has to correspond precisely to a set of distinct elements. First, it must align entirely with the documented client profile we just discussed.
Okay.
Second, the recommendation has to match the specific product features. And third, it must correspond to the associated costs and the risks.
Let's talk about that third part, the cost, because a product could mathematically align with the client's risk tolerance, but the fee structure might be quite high. How does the regulation handle the actual financial implications of the transaction?
It frames them strictly as standard operational parameters. The firm has to look at the costs, whether that's entry costs, management fees, whatever, and calculate if those costs are objectively appropriate for the client's evaluated financial situation and their objectives.
I see. The firm has to be able to demonstrate a direct logical correlation between the data collected in Step 1 and the instrument recommended in Step 2, factoring in those specific costs and risks.
So it's essentially a closed loop. The analysis has to come exclusively from the individual data points mapped against the strict mechanics of the product.
Precisely. If the product features or costs contradict the collected data, it's an objective procedural discrepancy.
Right. Which brings us to the final phase, right? The record keeping.
Yes, the documentation.
Because a firm could do the collection flawlessly. They could logically map the costs and risks perfectly under Article 54, Paragraph 2 of the 2016 Delegated Regulation.
Right.
But if they can't prove it to regulatory bodies, it's a massive, well, actually not massive, it's simply an unresolved operational gap.
Exactly. Documentation is the foundation of compliance here.
So what constitutes a legally sufficient evidentiary record, specifically for retail clients who have that higher level of regulatory protection under the European framework?
For retail clients, the requirement is laid out explicitly in Article 54, Paragraph 12 of the 2016 Delegated Regulation. It mandates the generation of a formal suitability report.
Okay, but how detailed does this report have to be? Could a firm just use, standard categorizations and boilerplate templates, like checking a box that says conservative client, conservative fund?
No, absolutely not. Standard categorizations are entirely insufficient under this framework. Article 54, Paragraph 12 makes it very clear that the report cannot be generic.
So what exactly needs to be in it?
It has to explicitly outline the advice given, and crucially, it must explain the precise reasons why that recommendation is suitable for that specific client.
I see.
It has to articulate the logical bridge referencing back to the exact points collected under Article 37-3, Paragraph 4 of the 1993 Financial Sector Law.
Right. So the report actually has to say, we are recommending this specific product because your stated capacity to bear losses is X, and the cost and risks of this product align with Y.
That is the exact level of clinical documentation required. The suitability report is the definitive legal proof. Without it, you cannot legally demonstrate that you adhered to the strict suitability rules.
Which perfectly circles us back to the core reality of this entire process.
Yeah.
Let's summarize this for our listeners and repeat that primary thesis a final time.
I think that's a good idea.
Read together Article 37-3, Paragraph 4 of the 1993 Financial Sector Law and Article 54, Paragraph 8 of the 2016 Delegated Regulation make the comprehensive collection and application of suitability information an absolute legal requirement before any advice is rendered.
Yes, that is the fundamental rule. It is binding, clinical, and directly applicable.
It's just a non-negotiable legal condition.
Okay.
So to wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final procedural thought to explore on your own. Take some time to review your firm's internal suitability reports. Look at them clinically. Do they explicitly document the rationale connecting the client's specific financial situation and loss capacity to the product's risks and costs? Or do they just merely state the advice using generic templates? If you don't see that precise evidentiary trail, you might have operational gaps that need immediate addressing. Follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Listen also to the French edition of the Luxembourg Fundcast.
Subscribe to Bertrand Mariaux and Rigor Media on YouTube. Connect with Bertrand on LinkedIn. Read the full analysis of the podcast at bertrandmariaux.com. All links in the show notes. This was the Luxembourg Fundcast.